Welcome to Driven, the Unscripted Success podcast, with your hosts, Mike Menino and Nariman Hamden, bringing you insights and stories on achieving personal, professional, and financial success.
Hey, everybody, this is Michael Menino. Welcome to Driven, Unscripted Success podcast. Today on the podcast, we're interviewing professionals who will share their experience with you, the audience, on how they got to where they're at today. And zooming from the beautiful island of Naples, Florida, is Dr. Shan Nair. He's owner-operator of Nucleus. And what they do is they help out startup companies throughout the world. Doctor, could you please do me a favor and introduce yourself?
Please call me Shan, because this Dr. Shan reminds me a little bit of Dr. No in the James Bond movie. And I prefer to be actually Dr. Yes when it comes to helping clients. So
awesome.
Please call me Shan.
I will, Shan.
So
okay, go ahead.
Basically, all I do is one thing. I run a company called Nucleus, and Nucleus basically helps US companies to expand abroad. So the US companies are well established, usually within the US. Many of them are private equity, venture capital, or small to medium-sized IPO companies. But in the foreign countries, they're starting up, or they have recently started up, and they have small levels of headcount. They don't have 1,000 people. They might have 40 people. And so they can't insource the accounting, tax, payroll, and corporate governance requirements. And so they have to outsource it. And we basically provide them with that outsourced function. The main value that we provide is that we give them a one-stop shop. So they work with just 2 people for all the countries they're in, irrespective of the number of countries. And that makes it much more efficient for them to manage their operations, and they spend less time on it. There is often a saying, that I've heard many people say, I spend 80% of my time managing 20% of my employees. And that's very easy to get into that situation when you have international employees spread around in different countries, because the laws and regulations of each country are different. And I think our aim is to avoid that 80-20 syndrome, so that the client can focus on the things that really matter to their business.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's hugely important. Efficiency is everything. And if they can work with you and only have 2 people to deal with instead of countries to deal with, that's a value, very high value proposition. Yeah. In your space and what you do, is there a lot of competition? And what sets you apart? Obviously, the ease is one of them. What sets you apart, and what comes easy to you?
There is some competition. Obviously, there always will be in any business activity. But I don't think there is serious competition, because the competition doesn't actually offer a one-stop shop. The competition basically offers a coordinator type person who can bring in experts from different countries to have conversations on different topics, but can't handle it all himself or herself. Whereas in our case, we can. That's one differentiating factor. And another one is that we're a small company. We're not we're just about 300 FTE employees, full-time equivalent employees. So we move fast. And that's what many of our clients, who are also fast-moving tech companies, need. They need somebody that responds, that doesn't have to be chased, even if they're in a different time zone, and get things done for them. And I think that's what we're pretty good at.
Nice. Awesome. If someone listening wants to get better at what you do, I mean, it appears that you make the very difficult process easy. If someone listening wants to get better at what you're doing, what tips and suggestions would you give them?
I would suggest that, first of all, if you're going international, you need to make sure that you have an adequate budget, because essentially when you go international, you're balancing risk and cost. So you can go at very low cost and take insane risks, or you can go very high cost University of Accounting professors advice, and very little risk and very high cost. What you have to do is something in the middle, where you have enough of a budget to minimize your risk, but then you're a business person, and business is all about risk. So you take a calculated risk and you calculate what that downside could be, and you make a provision for it, and then you move on. So having an adequate budget is important, because I've seen a lot of companies go abroad on a shoestring. Nothing happens for 3 to 4 years, and then they get bitten in the butt big time, and they end up over a period of 6 years spending probably more money than if they'd done it properly in the first place. So having an adequate budget is important. So when the board says we've decided to set up a company in country X, make sure that the board also approves the budget and that the budget is realistic, because otherwise don't do it.
Risk and reward, that's what everybody balances on investments. And time. And like you said, if you take longer on the time, it on a shoestring budget is that really a wise decision?
Yeah. The other thing is time. You mentioned time. Time is it's very important to understand time, because in foreign countries, things don't move at the speed of, we're in the world superpower. And part of the reason that we are a superpower is that it's very easy for people to come here and do business. A US company can be set up in a day.
Yes.
A Chinese company takes about 2 months to just set up, leave alone register and get going. So typically in a foreign country, with a few exceptions, for example, UK is an exception. It can take between about 4 to 6 weeks to set up a company, and then another 2 to 3 weeks to get it ready to do business, and then probably another month to get a bank account open, without which you can't even run payroll. So forward planning is very important, and an understanding that going to a country like UK, where they speak English, a funny kind of English, but they speak English. It's not the same as going into Texas or Oregon.
I know I've set up a few businesses, and I have a couple running right now, that it is so easy to start a business in the United States. And what really kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, versus the other countries, I don't know the differentials. One of the beauties of America is if you fail, it really doesn't impact you tremendously, if that makes sense. So if you have an incorporation and you start to do business and you do well, or you do it and then it fails, they don't typically come after you personally. I heard in Africa, if you start a business and it fails, you could be liable for the debt for years to come. So so it's easier to start a company, and it's safer for you in the long run. Is that true?
That is true. It's also true not just in Africa, but in Europe.
Yeah.
For example, banks won't lend without a personal guarantee. So if the business goes pear-shaped, they come after you. That's certainly one aspect of it. Another aspect is that, you can't run a business without hiring people. The US is the only country in the world that's got employment at will. India, white-collar workers in India come fairly close to employment at will. They're not quite employment at will, but not far off. There is no other country in the world where there's employment at will. So basically, if a business takes a hit and you need to downsize, that can actually be a very expensive procedure in Europe, which is why European companies are very hesitant. They think hard before they hire people, because they know that if they hire too many people, they can't, and then things go pear-shaped, because say there's a recession, they can't get rid of people as easily as they can here.
Really?
Part of why our economy is so resilient is that we can hire people in good times, fire people in bad times, and the company can move up and down. Whereas in Europe, you hire people in good times, and then the bad times come along when you don't have that much cash, and firing them now is an expensive process. So you fire them, but then there is a huge cost associated with the redundancy and other benefits. So these factors need to be taken into account before you actually produce your international expansion business plan, because you don't want to go around overhiring on the basis that you can, lose some additional manpower easily because you can't.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. I didn't know that letting go of people in other countries. I didn't even think about it.
It's
Just
also
all my,
important. It's also important to understand that there are risks associated. Many companies say, "Oh, I don't want to hire anybody. I'll just use contractors." And I'll give you a horror story.
okay.
One of our clients, US company, had a Belgian sales rep. He was part-time. He was a consultant. He wasn't an employee. He was selling their product, and he was also selling other companies' products. He did a great job selling their product, sold a lot. And they decided, well, there's clearly a market, so we're going to employ somebody now to sell the product. They asked him, will you work for us? He said, no, I want to be independent. So they hired their own employee. And that employee's job was now to pick up all these customers and get more customers. What they didn't know is that in Belgium, if you terminate an agency agreement, you have to effectively buy out the goodwill of the business that the agent has generated. It's like the agent has generated a mini business for you and you got to buy that business and you got to pay for the goodwill. You can't just, even if the agency agreement says termination at 2 months' notice, it's overridden by the laws that say you have to buy them out. So they had to pay the guy. The guy sued for $2 million and they had to pay him $2 million. The court ruled, I think,
Wow.
1.5 million. They had to pay a very substantial amount just to get rid of him.
That's crazy. That's for America. That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's a good thing you know that, and it's a good thing that people that have, that work with you understand your
That's really
level of
what I mean. That's really what I mean by the low risk crazy, the low cost crazy risk solution. You go and
right.
hire a guy for no cost, and everything works fine and dandy for 2 years, and now you
Yep.
want to change things, and you're hit with a big bill biting you in the butt.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a winner. So I got a question for you. What is one of the biggest challenges you had to overcome in your career? I mean, I would assume something like tariffs. Did that affect you guys at all, or how is that affected with you and your clients?
Strangely enough, the tariff situation, because most of our clients are, most but not all, are tech companies, and they're small tech companies below the radar of the big ones,
Hmm.
are relatively unaffected by the tariffs. But
Oh, good.
companies, they're relatively unaffected by the tariffs because they're selling cloud services up in the cloud. Um, and sales volumes are not, if in foreign countries, are not so high that they trigger other reporting and compliance and taxation and other requirements. So they're below a certain de minimis level above which the bureaucracy increases. Um, Having said that, there are some manufacturing clients that are impacted. So a good example is, a US company wanting to set up manufacturing. An obvious country to look at is the one next door, Mexico.
Hmm.
Now, they've set up a manufacturing facility in Mexico. They've been operating it for 6 years. But now suddenly the finished product is exported back into the US to be sold.
Hmm.
Suddenly now there's a tariff, and there is price resistance from customers. So they have to eat part of the tariff. Now their profit margins are reduced. And the whole idea of using cheaper Mexican labor as opposed to setting it up in the US and selling within the US is now an open question. And they could be writing off investment. So that kind of situation does happen where companies are looking at closure of a foreign operation or indeed moving an operation um, to a foreign country to sell internationally. In other words, to have an operation set up, say, Netherlands or Taiwan or somewhere, to sell their products all across the Far East or Europe, and have that as a separate profit center to the US profit center and never export anything from those countries to the US. So, in other words, you manufacture within the US for the US market and you
Hmm.
manufacture abroad for the foreign market, and these are two mini businesses that don't really interact with each other than the common management. So it does affect the way companies plan their tax structure. It can also have an opposite impact. It can drive companies to expand internationally faster, because if a company has got primarily foreign sales, instead of recognizing all the revenue here, they might want to do it in another country. Or if they're going to be selling into another country product, instead of importing raw materials here on which they pay duty, manufacturing and exporting, they can import the raw materials directly to the country where the market is, manufacture in that country and sell. So they've got a likelihood, an incentive to actually incorporate and set up an operation in that country, whereas previously they did not, which could actually lead to a loss of jobs in US. So, it's very difficult to predict because these tariff numbers are going up and down like a yo-yo. And until we have some stability in what these numbers are actually going to outturn at, it's very difficult to predict. And it's very difficult for businesses to plan. This is not a helpful situation. I know that the tariff numbers are being used to play a political game, but it doesn't help businesses in their planning and expansion.
Agreed. The short term seems a little shaky, to say the best. Wondering if the end goal, I think what the president was trying to do, and every politician tries to do something and it doesn't always work. End goal is to have equal tariffs. Do you think that would be a good or bad thing for the trade of the United States and other countries?
I think it will be good for the US balance of payments because imports will come down. Exports may go up because of the fact that the tariffs indirectly could bring the dollar down. The dollar has certainly been weaker now than it was before. And a weaker dollar means that our exports are going to be cheaper than they otherwise would be. So it may be beneficial. It'll generate some additional revenue, but equally the import volumes will go down. So overall, there may be less tax, actually not more tax revenue, but less customs duty revenue. But it'll help the balance of payments. I think whether or not it's going to help reduce government borrowing, or I don't know. I think government borrowing seems to be set to increase again, which is, I think, why you have a big political issue between Trump and Elon. But essentially, the time will tell. But I think the impact of this is very difficult to judge because it's very early days.
I agree.
What we know definitely is that imports have reduced, and that was one of his objectives.
Yeah, I get it. Very interested to see how this plays out. Sounds like things are going pretty well for you and your businesses. Looking forward to the future, wondering, a lot of people, invest, create a passive income. What do you do, and what tricks and tips would you give to people for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. Can you repeat?
Well, it's just basically as passive income. So when people end up making money, what we try and coach people is to save your money and then invest. So in passive income, have you done any passive income over the years?
Yeah, I think the main issue with the passive income, and that's where the private equity industry has been suffering, is that the high interest rates tend to put people off from taking risks, put investors off from taking risks. After all, why should you take a risk by investing in a PE firm, your money, which you might get 8 times the money you put in back over a period of 6 years? But you might lose the money, or you might not get times 8, you might get times 2, or you might get times 1.5 or something. When you can put it in the bank and over 5 years, you're going to get 25% compounded back. So, and it's safe, or it's allegedly safe. If you put it, probably some banks may go bust at some point, but it's allegedly safe. So basically, it makes it harder to raise money. And because you can't raise money, now you have less money to fund your portfolio companies. So you tell your portfolio companies that the money you gave them to last out the next 6 months is going to have to last out 2 years. So the portfolio companies now cut their costs. So there's a vicious cycle. This vicious cycle we've been suffering for the last two years. When Trump
Yes.
came in, there was initially business euphoria. But now I think people are kind of that kind of high, quote unquote, that businesses had has gone. And I think we're looking at stark reality. We're looking at uncertainty in these tariffs, uncertainty in the fact that the Federal Reserve is independent of the government. So the interest rates have come down. So I think time will tell. But I think the key point at the moment is passive income. It's easy. Put it in the bank and you'll be guaranteed a return. So why should you take a risk? I think that's the basic conundrum that private equity and investment firms have in raising capital to do things.
I agree with you to a point. We deal in real estate, and real estate's always been a safe asset with a very decent return.
Yeah.
And during the hard times, real estates are generally depressed. And when you buy them in the hard times, it's like a depressed stock. And then when it goes back up, it's the safest vehicle I've ever seen. And that's what I try and push people into. The bank, if you put it in the bank, you can get right now 4%. And whatever inflation is, you might even not offset that at certain points.
Well, right now, the interest rate exceeds the rate of inflation by quite a bit, by fact, almost 100%. So you're getting a real rate of return.
Right.
It's when rate of return starts to erode and becomes negative that you start looking at more riskier things to do. But property, as you say, bricks and mortar are safe. They're not going to go anywhere. And they will always have a residual value, even in an economic crash.
Yes. They're called real assets for a reason. Real estate means real. And I absolutely love it. So wrapping up the interview, wondering what plans you have for your company in the next 6 to 12 months. What's the big thing you're coming up with next?
I think the plan is to not to grow indiscriminately. The plan is to grow with clients for whom we can actually do a really good job. Clients with some problems where we know how to solve them. Clients with needs in countries that we know inside out. So the idea is to grow the business selectively with high quality clients. And by high quality client, I mean a client that's got a need that we can satisfy really well, so that the professional reputation of the company is maintained and enhanced, but it doesn't grow at some breakneck speed that a private equity investor might want to see. Because
Nice.
I'm the investor, and I'm happy with I just want to ensure that the service quality remains top notch.
That's key. 100%. Agreed wholeheartedly. Well, listen, Shane, wrapping up the interview, how much, and thanks for your time. First off, I do appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's really nice to take out the time and your experience and share it with the viewers. We really do appreciate it. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they connect with you or your company?
They can email me at Shan, very simple, SHAN, at nucleus-co.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. If anybody wants to contact him and understand more about dealing in 56 countries, which sounds insane to me. It sounds insane because each one of them has a different systems and process to deal with. And just sharing a little bit of what you did, I really do appreciate it. All right, we're going to let you go, and thank you very much for coming on. Do appreciate it. And please contact. I was going to say doctor, but Shan Nair. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
Thanks for listening to Driven, the Unscripted Success podcast. Want to share your story? Apply to be a guest at drivensuccesspodcast.com/guest.